All right, welcome to another NEA Wednesday webinar. I'm Dr. ZaLonya Allen, President of the National Entrepreneurs Association, and I'm here today with another amazing guest, Sophia Barnett. And today we're going to be talking about financial literacy. So I'm really looking forward to deep diving into this topic and finding out more about Sophia. So let's get some background information first. Sophia Barnett is a multifaceted visionary in justice, entrepreneurship, and empowerment. With a passion for socioeconomic justice and decades of entrepreneurial experience, Sophia founded the Making a Child Change Foundation. Committed to fostering economic equality, Sophia goes beyond the realm of a standard nonprofit by providing financial literacy education, meaningful employment, and crucial entrepreneurial skills to teens. As a leader of over 20 years, Sophia has championed numerous projects, including 4 ventures of her own, coupled with a lifelong commitment to imparting financial wisdom as a financial literacy advisor and a licensed minister. Beyond her professional pursuits, she is a culinary maestro and relishes her role as the mother of 3 fearfully and wonderfully made young adults. Sophia's passion for youth empowerment and commitment to improving Detroit's economic landscape are at the heart of the Making a Child Change mission. Sophia, welcome.
Howdy, howdy, Dr. ZaLonya. How you doing this evening?
I'm awesome. Looking forward to talking to you. And I didn't know you were a culinary maestro.
That
So,
I
so,
absolutely love to cook. And if it
oh,
wasn't for that,
wow.
listen, if it wasn't for that, the Making the Child Change Foundation would not have been birthed. And we'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that cooking thing because I could learn a few things from you.
Heard that.
So tell us a little bit more about making a child change and what got you involved in teaching financial literacy.
Yes, ma'am. So I'll go back to that previous thing about the food, right? So I love to cook. And it was one of those lovely December evenings. I was grilling. That's how much I love to cook. I grill all year round. And for those who don't know, we stay in the lovely state of Michigan and it snows. And I still get on the grill. I had made a macaroni and cheese hamburger because I couldn't make up my mind if I wanted it separate or if I wanted it together. And as I was eating it, Mac burgers is what popped in my head. And so I always take my ideas when Spirit downloads them and I write them down. And I'm like, I said I wasn't opening a restaurant till I retired because that's supposed to be fun for me. And so I'm just going to sit this over here. And so about a month later, a young lady came to me and she said, "Do you teach financial literacy to teens? I know you have your workshops through your financial company, but do you do anything for students?" I said, "No, I don't do kids." And that was in 2018. I said, "No, nope, I have my own. I'm good." But literally 2 weeks later, the Mac Burgers thing popped back in my head, and all I heard was "Making a Child Change," MACC, and it was so clear as day. And it was at that moment I had to fight the battle within myself to listen to the instructions that was coming to me, and or be hard-headed. And so I'm blessed to say that I listened. I followed the dream to go ahead and transition my teaching over from teaching small business owners and young adults to focusing on the youth. And primarily because I realized that teaching old dogs new trick thing is a real thing. Like people, they ask for help, but when they think they know it all, it is so hard to get them to listen. And I realized if we can get to the kids before they get into the money habits that we get as adults, before we get hung up in the debt, before we end up with all the credit card issues, then we can save a lot of our generation a lot of trauma and a lot of turmoil.
Wow, that's awesome. Talk about getting a message from the spirit realm. So, before we get into specifics, the financial industry, the topic of finances is really broad. So, when you talk about financial literacy, what exactly does that mean?
So a lot of people define it as simply as the knowledge, right, of any type of money management. I've come to learn that it goes much deeper than that. It's about a mindset more than anything. You have to understand what your relationship with money is first before you can add any type of knowledge, any type of wisdom, any type of education on top of it. You think about anybody who learns something new or try to break a habit. If you don't know at the core what is stemming you to behave the way you're acting, you will never make any changes long term. It'll be like everybody going into the new year making that resolution. I'm going to lose 15 pounds. But why is it that you're overweight to begin with? What is eating at you in your subconscious that's making you eat those snacks late at night? Do you have the real discipline to be able to go to the gym 3 times a week and change your eating habits to be able to see a difference? And it's the same thing when it comes to finances. You can say, I want to be able to save hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can say that when I get into retirement, I'm going to be able to not work ever again. But if you truly don't understand what is driving you in your current state, are you able to save monthly? Do you have that level of discipline? Do you know what your childhood triggers and traumas are to why you look at money the way you look at it today? A lot of that stuff play a huge part in why people spend emotionally, why people make bad financial decisions and regret them later, buyer's remorse, right? And all that stuff plays a huge part in what I believe financial literacy is. It's twofold. It's not just about the knowledge. It's also about who you were, where you come from, and then being able to now make a plan for your future.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you don't just talk about financial statements or budgeting, but you really look at the psychology of money. And often there is trauma attached to our finances, especially if you're mismanaging money. So, is that why you start at such a young age with the youth before some bad habits start to develop?
Yes. And listen, what I've learned and what I've been taught is that we get about 70% of our money bad habits from our parents. So, like when I'm sitting down talking to students, I can hear their parents talking in the classrooms. And I'm listening to them, and I said, "This is how you feel about your allowance that you get. It's not enough. I didn't wasn't able to go buy this thing that I wanted to go buy," and I'm laughing because I'm like, this is not a child talking to me. I had these conversations with cousins and sisters and family members and friends. I know who's really talking. So yes, getting to them at a point to where they're still moldable, right? Where you can still give them some new insights. And that ultimate goal is once I get them by themselves away from the trauma, figuring out exactly how they're thinking emotionally, physically towards the dollar. Now they can take that same energy back home, and it's a trickle up effect instead of a trickle down effect.
Oh, wow, that's great. And I read a book once that said we either follow the pattern of our mom or our dad, but if we sit down and think about it, we will see, which pattern that we're following. So in our entrepreneur boot camp, we have a 9-week boot camp. We talk a little bit about your relationship with money. And way back in the beginning, I'll never forget, we had an entrepreneur talk about, she had a breakthrough really. She talked about how she liked to spend all of her money and she didn't understand why. But
Mm,
then after, listening to the information and kind of analyzing her own background, she realized that her mom took all of her money as a child. And
wow.
so she developed this behavior of spending all of her money before it could be taken from her.
Mm.
And I think that's a great example of trauma. So, what exactly would you do with someone experiencing something like that to begin to change their money habits?
First, like you said, recognizing what the trauma is. But first, you have to know where you are currently. I tell people to start where you are, and then you can work yourself backwards. So with teens, for those of them who they find themselves with a poor mentality or a scarcity mentality where it's never enough, or they feel like if I spend anything, then I'm gonna lose it all. Now you need to understand what is causing that. And a lot of them, when they sit down and they talk about it, they be like, oh, well, when I used to go to the store, before we got out the car, mom used to say, don't you go in here, don't you ask for anything. Like my grandfather used to quote this to me faithfully. We got McDonald's at home. You're not getting no McDonald's, right? When I was a kid. I'm glad my grandmother gave me better skills than he did when it came to finances, but that could have traumatized me. Certain people have a hard time wanting to spend money, right? And I hate using that word spend, because when you say spend, it means to come to an end. I believe in circulating your dollars. A lot of people have a hard time even wanting to do anything with their dollars, and then they're stingy with it. Like, they don't know how to give, they don't know how to be able to tithe, they don't know how to be able to buy themselves something nice that they deserve. That comes from always never having that lack, like you said with the example with that boot camp student. It was always taken from her. Now she like, well, now I get an opportunity, I get to spend my money the way I want to spend it. And then they never get a chance to save, they never get a chance to invest. So it's like both ends of the scale with extremes. And then there's those people in the middle, right, who have figured out the way to find a balance to where, girl, I love to shop, I'm gonna shop every week if I want to. But then they still have long-term goals and they can't reach them, and they don't understand why. Because now I'm the one in control. We have to understand those subconscious thoughts and the programming and the words that we're speaking, because all of that plays a huge part on how we're reacting today. So understand where you are, understand what those relationship conversations that you had as a kid. Pay attention to any of the ways that money was used around you, or how people discuss finances, or did anybody discuss finances? Because I know a lot of people who grew up in households, they had no clue about anything that took place. So by the time they went on their own and they had to learn how to pay bills or pay rent or be responsible for their own dollar, they can't. And so they mismanage it. They come up short some months. They don't know how to make sure everything gets done on time. They don't know nothing about credit. They just swiping cards because they got the application in the mail. And so you have to know what it is, and you have to be honest with yourself about what it is. Like, you can lie to anybody else, but I promise you, the only person who's going to suffer with that lie is you.
That's powerful. And yes, just being aware that there's a problem is going to make a big difference, because so much of what we do is subconscious. In fact, 95% of behavior is subconscious. Like, we're just doing things and not understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I want to talk specifically about entrepreneurship. So as an entrepreneur, you have to manage money differently.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your advice there? Because as far as like budgeting and how you manage it, because we know as entrepreneurs that it's cyclical, it's seasonal. Sometimes business is booming. Sometimes you get a dry spell, there's no money coming in. So what advice can you give for dealing with the uncertainty of how your money is coming in?
That's a great question, Dr. ZaLonya. One of the things that I do with my clients is they have a personal finance interview sheet. And before I even get into the details of that, understand, and this is my warning to all entrepreneurs, future, past, and present, you are going to manage your business funds the way you manage your personal funds. Okay? Because the habits that you have in your regular life don't change just because a new title is over the bank account. I promise you that. Now, that was my warning. Okay, so personal finance interview sheet allows you to track your history of income and spending, or circulations, right? And the reason we do this is because as entrepreneurs, you're right, finances may not always come in the same season. For example, when I had my financial company, my booming season was January through April. And that's when we got all of our tax clients. That was where we got the majority of our funding in. When you're creating a budget for your business, you have to do a whole 12-month budget. And I'm talking about for the expenses side, because that way you're now knowledgeable of The beginning of the year, my income is going to be double. The end of the year, it's going to be real suspect. Like, unless you offer other programs or you offer other things. Same thing like with my lawn care people. A lot of people suffered a couple of winters ago when we didn't get a lot of snow. So that means they had to transition, they had to pivot to make more money in the summer months. You have to understand what your actual cycle is when it comes to your income coming into your account. Because that way, you know, if I'm making $25,000 in the first 3 months and I'm barely gonna make 10, I need to be able to put up that money. Hear me, y'all. This is where discipline come in at. I have to put up 20 of that $1,000 to be able to carry me out for the rest of the year. That is the thing that you have to learn to train yourself to do. And it does take a year to be able to find out exactly what your highs and lows are. That way you get a steady, almost like a guide to know what you can do when you're going to do it. Once you get that year in, after that, everything else you can forecast it off of. But you have to be able to have some form of data to know what your expenses is for a whole year period, and then what your major income breaks are, so that you know when you can save for the future. And if you can, pay stuff off early. You can pay your rent or your lease for your building ahead of time. You don't have to wait until the due date to send that money in. And a lot of times, a lot of landlords will give you a bonus for paying early. You know what? Because you want to pay 12 months in advance, I'm only going to charge you for 10. But those are the type of conversations you can have up front when you know exactly what your money looks like.
Wow, this is great information. I think discipline is the key. You can't be the kind of person where money burns a hole in your pocket, and if it's there, you got to spend it all. If you pay yourself $1,000 a week, $2,000 a week, that's what you have to live off of. You can't go rob the business account because there's a lot of money in there, because
Exactly.
those downtimes are coming. So, a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with financing the business in the
Mhm.
beginning. A lot bootstrap it or use personal funds. What is your advice on that? Do you recommend bank loan, line of credit? Like, for entrepreneurs who need funding, what's your advice for them?
If you have a for-profit business and you're starting off with the bootstrapping, first off, I need you to understand you need two separate accounts to track everything. Because what you're going to do is you're going to take money from your personal account and you're going to transfer it into the business account and then use the funding for your business. And the reason you do that is because then you're going to be able to mark that as equity into the business. So when your business gets into the positive, you'll know exactly how much you get to pay yourself back. A lot of people think that they just start buying stuff with their own credit cards. They just start swiping things with their own bank account. And listen, from an accountant perspective, that is a headache. And we don't like that. Okay. So you want to make sure from jump, you do not put anything in your personal accounts. If you have to fund $5,000 for an event, you transfer that money to the business account. Now, when it comes to how you can get funding, nonprofits actually can get this done a lot easier because you got grant opportunities. You got a lot of people with donations and things of that nature. But for-profit businesses, there are a lot of different companies who actually offer services. I would suggest Googling CDFIs. That's Community Development Funding Institutions. They give you lower interest rates. They give you better terms and conditions. A good company that's in the city of Detroit is Black Leaders Detroit, where they have a $25,000 no interest loan. So it gives you a long period of time to be able to pay it back, and you don't have to worry about the interest that's associated with it. A lot of people get intimidated when they get a loan because it's like, I'm paying back high interest, 10, 20, 15%, 15% on the dollar. And that can be like, if that's the case, I'm not getting that loan, right? And now your business is suffering. Also, looking for investors, angel investors. Those are excellent places to be able to get extra money. And guess what? You don't have to worry about paying it back immediately. They give you 6 months to 12 months grace period in between your terms and conditions. So you'll be able to have the money to now start somewhere, to start making an income, getting into the positive. And then at that point, you have the discipline to pay the loan back on time without penalties. Some other methods that I would say: pitch competitions. Listen, I was the winner of the NEA pitch competition one year, and that came in extra handy for our after school curriculum workbooks that we needed printed. And we was able to get a laptop for the business. Different things like that. You get real creative, y'all. Host fundraising events where you actually have your product out into the open and you're able to market to other people. Go to networking events. Set up tables at different social events, because what that does is it gets more people in your face and it gives other people an opportunity to invest in your business as well. So you don't have to be bootstrapping it all the way up. You can have some partners out there who also going to strap with you.
Awesome. So, what is your take on paying yourself first? I've heard many schools of thought on this. People say, well, if your business is not profitable, you shouldn't be paying yourself. And then some people say, pay yourself first no matter what. So, what's your take on that?
I'm actually right in the middle. This is a huge gray area for me personally. I believe you have to know where you are in your business. I agree 100% with the pay yourself first concept, because a lot of entrepreneurs don't include salary as a line item in their expenses. And if you're doing a business for long term and you don't start off with a salary, then 2 years from now, you decide to put that as a line item, and you see that huge drop in revenue as your net profits completely drop and fall off. That's because you never planned to pay yourself to begin with. Another reason why it's important to pay yourself is because, again, people with that mixed bank account, I have a bill due, but the money is in my business bank account, so I'm gonna swipe the card. If you gave yourself the salary for the week, you would already had the money in your personal account. So now you're not mixing finances. That's the reason why paying is so important. And you get benefits. A lot of people don't know, when you actually have employees on record, that's tax bracket write-offs depending on what category you fall in as an employee. Last year, they were able to give anybody who hired people who made under $29,000 a huge tax break in credits because they were considered low income. You miss out on that, right? You know you can't afford to pay yourself your $75,000 and $80,000 dream, but you may only be able to pay yourself $10,000 to $15,000. Guess what? That makes you low income. Guess what? That makes you qualify for those write-offs. Stuff like that people need to know. Like, it's important and it comes in handy when you're able to do it that way. Now, my gray area: do not pay yourself thousands of dollars if you're not making thousands of dollars. You have to be very realistic about the income that you have coming in, but pay yourself something. Get in the habit of making sure that your money is separate. The same way you took that money out of your personal account and put it in your business account to be able to start for equity is the same way you need to be transacting and showing lines that now I am paying myself from my business account to my personal account. Now, I will always suggest some form of payroll, but listen, if you can't afford payroll, banks are not going to beat you up when they can see that there's a consistent amount that you're doing every single month as a transaction for paying yourself a salary. So if that's $25 a week, that's fine. If it's $1,500 a week, that's fine. But when it comes to you trying to get bank loans, your financing record has to be to the T. And they don't want to see that you got Netflix and Amazon coming out of your business account for your personal stuff. So make sure you're able to transfer those funds weekly, not daily. Let's not be crazy. There's no daily payroll, or the 15th and the 30th, or every 2 weeks, whatever timeline you come up with. But just be very strategic and very intentional about it.
Wow, lots of great advice there. I do want to say commingling funds will get you in a lot of trouble, and that's when you're paying Netflix and personal items from the business account. So important to keep those things separate. I can't believe we are out of time, but I do
Mm.
have to ask you about taxes, because this is where a lot of entrepreneurs get in trouble. They're not paying those quarterly taxes, and then at the end of the year, everything piles up and they're in a financial ditch. So, what is your best advice on taxes and how to handle that?
So my rule when it comes to when I talk about the budgeting cycle, the boss budget, when you were an employee, guess who got their money first? The government. You have to keep almost that same mentality when you're in the business world. No, if you don't know what percentage that you fall in category wise, talk to an accountant. They will give you that information for free. You can Google the information. You can literally in your chat GPT type in how much you made, what state you stayed in, and what's the percentage of taxes that's going to come out. They even have estimate tax calculators on the IRS website. Listen, it may be a quarter where you did not make a lot of money, but as long as you report exactly what it is, they're only going to charge you that percent off. And you make sure you put that in a separate account. For my company, we have automatically withdrawing. Every quarter, taxes go straight to the state of Michigan, go straight to federal, go straight to the city. Because I don't want the headache of having to look back up next year when I'm filing taxes. And now I got to owe a whole lot of money. No, I'm not used to that lifestyle. I'm used to getting some refunds and some rebates. So be intentional about making sure that your taxes are separate in a separate account. That's something I teach all people when it comes to finances. It's okay to have multiple bank accounts because you can keep things separate but equal. Have an account for just your taxes, have an account for your salary, have an account for the major expenses for your business. And if you have money just sitting around, I always suggest keeping that money in a high yield savings account. Don't have that just sitting in your checking account not making no money because they just giving you pennies every month. So those are my strategies as far as tax go. Hopefully that's helpful.
Absolutely. You are just a wealth of information, and we are out of time. So, if people want to get in touch with you to learn more, how can they reach you?
Yes, yes. You can go right on over to www.makingachildchange FDN, that's Frank Douglas Nancy, short for foundation.org. If you want a link to everything that we have going on, including our financial literacy event taking place on April 26th, if you go to our link tree, you can type in link tree on Google and type in MACCFDN, that's Mac Foundation for short, and you'll get a link to every single one of our programs, volunteers, donations, and a link to our website and YouTube page as well.
All right, good stuff. Well, thank you for joining us, Sophia. And we're going to have you back because I learned a few things. You are quite the expert. So, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time on NEA Wednesday webinar.
Thank you for having me. Have a blessed day, everybody.